Okay, take 374. Hi, Patreons.
Still meaning no harm to your planet.
They didn't see that. I deleted the other scenes.
Okay. Fair enough. Hello, everyone.
Oh, hey, folks. We're getting ready to do, guess what? And I don't have the background up.
Man, we're having a rough day. Hey, check it out.
There we are.
Kevin's got some new clip art. It's not bad for the time invested.
Yeah.
It's actually
Scott,
really nice.
Scott came to me and said, do we have a Halloween one? And I'm going, I thought we did, but we didn't.
So here we are, kids.
Oh, yeah. And Patreons, keep an eye at the end of this video. I won't say any more than that. What?
Nothing.
Go ahead.
Nothing, man.
They want to see the raw behind-the-scenes turmoil and frustration. And
looks like the fact that I got stung by a bee 3 times.
It does not.
Why didn't y'all tell me I was that fat? Jeez.
Yeah.
I took one look at that and go, man, who's a sweaty fat kid? Oh.
We were testing. Well, you can show them the camera you're playing with. It's right there, and unfortunately, this little assembly, while very convenient and very compatible with the audio recorder there, but it's got a fixed fisheye lens for the moment, at least so we think. We haven't learned enough about it. And so needless to say, Scott put the camera on a short tripod at belly level, so it tends to, fisheye. So what's dead center? And it enlarges it.
Too much.
Plus the camera adds 20 pounds no matter what.
Not in this case, I have a truck.
Oh, so this, I guess we should technically get started on the true podcast as opposed to the comedy video cast that we're doing right now. Deep sigh, deep breath, manageable, vegetable.
Yes. Flatulent giraffe.
That too.
Aricopocus. We haven't said that in a while.
Are you opening or am I?
I'll let you open.
Gnat right in my nose.
That's not funny.
No, it's not. Hey, Jeeples. Welcome to another exciting episode of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott, or at least it should. Do I need to restart?
No, keep going. We're professionals here.
We're professional. A gnat has gotten into the studio and is flying around, and it seems to like to annoy either my nose or Scott's nose.
No, it's fine.
Oh, we've had a wet season here in Florida. So anyway, back to the startup of the show. I'm Kevin. If you are a new listener, welcome. I'm the engineer, the guy who reads manuals, uses the correct tools, and typically follows the instructions in those manuals.
And I'm Scott. I'm the slapstick parts guy on a continual mission to try and kill this little gnat because it's really annoying me. But other than that, I do not use a torque wrench unless under complete adult supervision, like with Kevin. Mm-hmm. I have an affinity for zip ties, and not to mention really terrible 80s. No, actually, no, not terrible. Really good 80s cartoons. Yeah, so, on that, while we will sure it worked for us as well as what didn't,
it's up to you to do your research, make your own decisions, and then, of course, follow the instructions given to you by the manufacturers.
Once you're done reading them. And on that note, if anybody has instructions to a Gladiator amp research install steps, please send them my way on the trail podcast at gmail.com because I want to read the instructions before I start getting dirty.
Yeah, it sounds like
shameless plug.
Shameless plug because your financial department has decreed that she wants the amp power steps to fit your Glad. Mm-hmm. And since everything's kind of new that way, there's lots of information about wiring colors and codes and that kind of stuff for JKs, but not a whole lot for JLs and even less for JTs.
And because this show's not brought to you by Google, thanks Google. So when we Google the JL amp step research wiring or door pin wiring, we get 96 Ford F-150.
Yeah, basically, I'm trying to figure out exactly how the Gladiator's door ajar circuit, which is what the amp steps are supposed to tie into, how does that operate? Is that a switched ground circuit? Is it a switched power circuit? Or is it a proximity or something different? So that we know what we're doing up front when we go to make the connections. And yes, we will follow the instructions, but of course, these steps need to be installed with a few
minor tweaks
for preference, because Dory does plan on running doorless.
Yeah,
and she still wants to have a manual override on her steps.
Yeah, so we're going to think it's going to be creative, so stay tuned for that. But anyways, this is show 102, kids. We made it past 101
and survived.
Exactly. And a big thank you to John Carl for the last show. That was really awesome.
That was awesome. And thank you to everybody that sent us notes at hoping we were okay. We were missed by Sally, and unfortunately my former teammates when the Corps of Engineers weren't missed. They are all in Mobile, and I know many of them took some pretty serious hits, and my thoughts and prayers to them. And I realize it's been a little while now by the time this show releases, but it's still kind of a concern for me that all of my teammates were, rather than being the responders, were the ones that were, those that were hit. So, hurricane preparedness, any disaster preparedness is not stupid. I mean, one of my friends had the most unfortunate thing in that he and his family were fine. Yes, their house was damaged. Fortunately, his house, he designed it, and it was on a raised foundation. So the main living quarters survived okay, but the rest of the downstairs where all of his tools and equipment and that stuff was flooded with salt water. Yeah. But the shock was going out there during the eye of the hurricane and finding a poor gentleman who didn't make it, and he found his corpse under his porch, under my friend's porch, and he had to take care of that in the middle of a hurricane. So my hat's off to him for dealing with a very, very difficult situation, but also maintaining that I am going to, recover and rebuild. So and thoughts and prayers to everybody affected by this year's really bizarre level of atmospheric disturbances.
Yeah, no, this 2020 is going to go down in the record books as probably one of the most interesting years.
That's not the adjective I would choose.
So this is our family.
It is
family show.
Just we'll leave it at that.
Yes.
So, anywho,
yes. Moving on.
We really love our listener feedback. That is just flat out the greatest thing that we've got here, and they give us so much good information and topics for shows. So to that end, I think we want to actually lead off this show with some a note or email, was it?
We got an email from a listener,
Stephen Cassidy.
Yeah,
Stephen, I hope you don't mind that we used your full name, but Stephen sent us a note that he has a new JL, and he is adding some neat stuff. He also gives me some. He gave us some feedback that was great about our nostalgic look back show, which was show 100, and he was talking about the fact that I talked about the tractor horsepower, and then he talks about he learned to turn his wrench on his dad's square body Chevy, and I told Scott, I said, Flashback City, I had a powder blue Chevy with a white hard roof, a C10.
Is that like an old Bob Seger song? I had a powder blue Chevy with a...
Yeah, there's several of them like that. So the old square body days, and I learned to spend... I shouldn't say I honed much of my wrench turning skills, because by that time I was definitely had my driver's license and heading off to college, and constantly I'd come home from college at the end of the semester, and my dad would tell me something had died on the truck, and I'd look at him and go, Dad, it's a C10, that's a half ton, and you're trying to pull about 4 tons of hay wagon behind it.
Nah, they're all the same.
And I'd like to say that my dad was just an old farmer. No, Dad was a licensed mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at me and smiled. He said, yeah, I know, but you'll fix it.
I ain't spending the extra $2,000 for a heavy duty. I got a son.
So, Stephen, thanks for that. You gave me one heck of a flashback. He went in to talk about adding a dual band amateur radio, and he's having fun. He likes to do custom installs to be clean and factory looking, to quote him. And I'm right with you there, Stephen. That's my way through and through. I want to make the slightly altered look continue to look just slightly altered, Scott's over here rolling his eyes going, yeah, okay. Define slightly.
Yeah, again, every time you say that, I still kind of chuckle. It's an inside joke, kids.
Yeah. So he asks a bit about body armor and skid plates, right, Scott?
Yeah, he actually wanted to know, because he had a couple manufacturers lined up for ideas, but he wanted to get our take on some of them, because mainly he's going to do a little bit of overlanding kind of stuff. And, the biggest thing I had with the JK with the 3.8 is the weight penalty. And his questions were basically about skid plates and, paying a weight penalty. Should he go with aluminum or steel? And that's one of the things where, again, kudos to him, because he did his research. He was actually looking at, the gross vehicle weight, the whole 9 yards. About, he also looked at what are the pros and cons of 60-61 aluminum compared to 50-52, and that's great. Kudos to you for doing your research, but that you got it wrong. The Van Halen album was 5150. Okay, and oh wait, sorry, that's aluminum. But that gives you an idea how far I go into the metallurgy.
And of course, if you're into country music, 5150 is the
5150. We got money, but the point though is that again, the weight was at the time with the JK was a big thing for us, and we started looking at aluminum bumpers and armor because when we took it on the scale with the steel bumpers and all that stuff we had,
extra portly,
the scale said Peterbilt. I'm like, well, what? Boy, what you hauling? 70,000 pounds gross vehicle weight? No, a full tank of gas, 2 Australian Shepherds, and all their fur. But again, it's one of those kind of things where I really started to pay attention to weight. Now with the Gladiator, and for what we're going to use it for, weight's not so much of an issue. With the LJ, for what I'm going to use it for, again, a lot of people like using the corner armor and all that kind of stuff. And me and Kevin were talking, and the biggest place I want to protect all of our Jeeps is in the rocker area. To me, that's the bash points. That's where when you come the front wheels over an obstacle, whether it be a rock in the boulder field or a tree trunk, on the back trails. Yeah, but here's the biggest thing that me and Kevin we share the same point of view on this and I actually sat there and I asked a person why they wanted to buy this corner armor so bad, and they said, well, I got to protect the corners of my Jeep. Okay, all right, that makes sense. And how do you install it? Well, I got to drill a bunch of holes to do the nutserts.
Yeah, in the sheet metal you're trying to protect.
And I sit there and go, okay, you know what? Hey, more power to you. But I've seen the body armor off the Jeep, and when they use the drill, especially on a JK and other models with thin metal, it dimples the metal.
It does.
You're looking at a wavy quarter panel now that you're trying to protect with armor.
Right.
I don't get it. I'm sorry. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, and people are going to blow up the email, but if you have a nice, strong, sturdy fender, a metal fender, that should protect your quarter panels for the most part. Because again, we had a friend, Ron, who hit a tree with armor.
And he backed up. Well, here's the thing is, folks, if you want armor, that's fine. I have absolutely no problem with people who want exterior body armor. Body armor came into being, though, kind of as a concept, the exterior, not the belly armor, by the guys who were crawling through the rock fields and regularly laid their Jeeps over on the side. And they wanted to stiffen up the body enough so that it wouldn't jam, so you couldn't open doors and things like that.
Right.
For the rest of us, it's kind of like Scott said, most of us, tree branches scraping on the side, you can get magnetic armor that doesn't make holes.
Yeah.
That's just or wrap, you said, wrap it with a good quality wrap.
Ceramic coat. That even helps.
It does. So, again, if you like the look and want it, by all means, go for it. Yep. But understand that when you try to justify it saying, I want exterior body armor to protect my Jeep, your Jeep does a really good job of protecting itself and you.
Yeah.
Now, belly armor that has its real good uses. But again, I'm going to go with my TJ. Scott, you've been there. You've actually been in the back seat with another person in the passenger seat and me driving, and me finding the obstacle with the back end of my Jeep hard enough that I think I gave you a couple of compressed discs.
We're not supposed to talk about that on the compressed days.
Anyway, tongue in cheek there, folks. Yeah. I did not damage Scott.
No, I'm fine.
But we did land very, very hard right on my gas tank skid.
My liver. Well, yeah, and then we did. And
where I'm going with that is it held up just fine.
Yeah.
And all the while, it's holding the gas tank, a plastic gas tank, which guarantee if I'd come down on that polypropylene gas tank, we wouldn't be here right now.
You're going to split the seam of that gas tank. I'm going to split my pants after pizza night. But no, go ahead. No. Well, this is awkward now. Well, the whole thing, like we talked about, is that if you're going to do armor and you're worried about weight penalty, my opinion is this: save the aluminum for the outside body. Mm-hmm. Okay, steel rocker guards. That's where you want to have the extra weight for the durability. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, keep the steel pans for the
belly,
for the belly, because that way, one, it's a lot smaller of a piece.
Right.
Your skid pan's going to be so big, not the entire back end of your Jeep that is all now steel, whatever, thick, if you will. My opinion is do that, is because we talked about the aluminum, how the deformation can happen so much. It might still go through that aluminum. Doesn't matter if it's 50-52 or 60-61 or 88-23. I've just made that number up. It's going to punch through something.
Well, we'll go into the technical in just a minute, and I'll get kind of deep into this for those that like the details. But I guess I'm looking at the fact that, all right, the best armor that you can have for any vehicle, not just a Jeep, is learning to drive it. Know where your Jeep is. If you're still learning a Jeep and you're thinking armor will protect it, it won't. Okay, it'll do a reasonable job of stopping impacts for some pieces, but the axle that hangs down the lowest. All right. Yeah. Most belly armor is above the axle. Yes, there are skid plates for gear cases, for your differentials, but they still just move that force up to the axle tubes, which are even thinner than the cast housing. So learning your Jeep and learning to drive, the biggest thing that I see people do consistently on the trail is picking a poor line. And if you're new to Jeeps or you just haven't got a lot of trail experience, line is where you're putting your tires. And people will, look at that rock. I'll try and straddle it. That's the worst thing you can do. If you put your tire, and this is not a hard, fast rule, but if you drive knowing where your low points of your belly is so that your tires lift you onto the high points. Okay, if you drive over the high point with a tire, you can't rip out the belly with that high point. All right.
Yeah.
This is where Scott's comment about rocker protection does come in, because of course, if you come off the front tire, what's below your front tire? Your rocker, and then you got to get onto the rear tire. Yes, before you scream too loud, I can actually hear people screaming all the way through the headset from Kansas, is it? No, it might be Illinois. Anyway, if you get too high of a obstruction, you're going to flip your Jeep. Yeah, okay, prudence does play in here. But, the reason you need belly pans is you're straddling something that maybe you shouldn't be straddling. Now, if you're into rock hill climbing, go in the boulder fields, I get it. And you're not looking for a really hard impact there, because most of the time you're down in the below 1 mile an hour crawl speeds through the boulders.
Oh, you should be.
You should be. Yeah. Yes, we both know some people that have been throwing tire smoke in the air. Exactly. The beer bottles hung out of the window so that it doesn't.
No.
Hey, I'm just speaking the truth here. I've seen some crazy things. But, okay, and here's what I'm looking at is that I think the best armor for your Jeep is you learning to use your Jeep correctly, how to drive it. Get somebody out there as a trail spotter. If need be, go out in a small group and go out for a learning session. And why do I say that? Because you're not going to be offending people behind you. Well, if you stop, put the Jeep in park, put your parking brake on, get out, and look yourself. Just be careful getting out. It's not a normal step out. You may be stepping out into a ravine. But look. Know where your differentials are hanging down. Know where your drive shafts are.
There's nothing wrong with walking an obstacle.
Yeah, and get that through. If you can make a mental map of the underside of your Jeep, where the protrusions are, where the weak spots are, where the tough spots are. Like I said, on a TJ, you can dang near jack the Jeep up on the gas skid pan.
Right.
Don't try it, folks, because if you do it in the dead metal, you will dent it. But those are kinds of the things you learn. Can you harden them? Yes, you can. As Scott said, you do add a weight penalty every time you add another layer of metal. So you want to do it judiciously and where it's needed. I have seen armor plating on things that I'm going, really? Why would you put a piece of armor on a hose that can move? But to each their own.
Yeah.
Your front axle's your most vulnerable part. Ask the guys who have broken front knuckles, U-joints, ball joints.
We found my right front lower control arm bracket is bent.
Yeah. So those are the kinds of things that you come off an obstacle on a wheel and you come down on that lower arm on a TJ, or actually any number of them, and the factory ones from the TJs are just bent sheet metal.
Yeah, they're stamped steel.
And so they kind of go in a heartbeat. Look at them wrong and they twist.
Boo.
Okay, now you got to pull to the left.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Now, weight. A lot of overall weight, particularly when your power to weight ratio is a little off, you do want to pay attention to every pound. But I will tell you that most people carry more junk in their Jeep than the weight of the body armor, self included. Well, and yes, I've helped you clean your Jeep out a time or two.
Well, the biggest thing that gets me, and again, here comes the hate mails. People that complain about, they don't want to carry the extra weight of the spare tire. And I've seen this comment recently. It's one of the reasons why I don't get rid of Facebook is because of this reason. Is, someone else will give me their spare tire. I'm not giving you my spare tire.
No, because I may pop a bead on the same stump that you.
Yeah, we had to go with Rob Trahan from Tampa Jeep Crew. We brought that same thing about cutting a valve stem, and he's like, "No, I've had people go, let me get you use your spare." No, I'm not. No, sorry. But yet they'll pack 400 pounds of audio gear and subwoofers in the Jeep.
Yeah. So, having said that,
which is nothing wrong.
Remember when you add weight, where to add it. And this comes back to the discussion of aluminum versus steel. See how I brought it all back to you?
Yeah. Nicely done.
If you're going to add belly armor, I kind of like steel. Aluminum, when you drag it across rocks, can actually work just as well as steel, but it also peels like somebody in a bar seat peeling a label off a Bud Light bottle.
Everyone's seen the picture of the F-150 peeled like a beer can.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of what this does. So you can only drag aluminum skid plates over over rocks so many times before you cut it in half.
Yeah.
You can, and so if you're a rock climber, this, and you probably have steel underbelly. On the other hand, you don't want to put 500 or 600 pounds of steel armor up high. Because you're adding not just to the weight of the vehicle, but the balance of the vehicle. The rollover moment is a lot worse when you put weight above the center line.
Yeah.
In fact, the lower you keep it, the more stable your Jeep can be. There's other issues that you have to remember, and this is going to get into the technical stuff. So those of you that are into technical, pay attention.
Buckle up.
Those that are not, it's time to go get your popcorn. All right, when you impact a skid plate, there's more than just the impact force where the rock, the bolt, the tree, whatever hits it.
You had a perfect example of the napkin.
Yeah, if you take a napkin and kind of hold it, have your friend hold it between their hands, two hands, and then poke up with your finger, you're going to pull their hands together. Okay? That's just a normal thing of deformation. It's how we hold up suspension bridges. We use the curvature to carry the load, and it sounds funny, but
keystone.
Yeah, when you smack the bottom of a skid plate and hard enough to bend it, that's what happens in those heavy impacts. Now the light stuff, okay, but then again, if you're only hammering in the light stuff, you probably don't need a skid plate to begin with.
Right.
The Jeep's belly oil pan is not exactly tinfoil. It's a little heavier than most. And then the mid-belly pans are actually pretty massive on almost every model Jeep I can think of, except maybe the early Willys.
Well, the JKs were kind of thin. Our transmission pan on our JK took a hit with a rock.
Yeah. So, but that got past your pan. That wasn't that the belly pan was damaged and let it through, is what I'm saying. It was positional. But what happens is a lot of the armor can fail when it gets punched because it gets pulled sideways. And when I say pulled sideways, if you take and dimple a pan, a nominally flat sheet of metal, in the middle, the edges pull in towards the middle, and it can shear right through the bolt, pull out from under the bolt. If you've ever seen a car that's been in an accident and you notice that the plastic parts are all snapped free nowhere near the accident, and it's from that pulling force that has to happen when the impact occurs. And this is why I don't really, it's one of the main reasons I don't care for aluminum armor under the belly, because that's where you're going to get that poke, that really hard poke when you come off a rock unexpectedly and slam down on something. And it can and if you look at a lot of your skid pans, how far is the bolt from the edge of that material? In a lot of cases, it's right there.
Yeah, you have very little room to tear.
Now, if you look at, let's use a TJ belly pan from the factory. There's 6 bolts, 3 on each side, that bolt up into the frame rail.
There's about an acre in between each one.
But there's also, between it and the outer edge of that pan, it's a fairly long distance. And to make it fit, Jeep actually forged it rolled down into an L so that it actually would clip. Even if the bolt was loose and it slid sideways from an impact, it would hook onto the bolt head. Okay? It's a very strong design. Almost every armor that I've seen has been a flat plate, that just would slide out from under, because we're talking quite literally thousands of pounds of force in that kind of an impact. Yeah. So just all the more reason, having weight low, having structural strength low, it's great underneath. Body armor up top, okay. Unless you're one of those guys, and we have a friend who actually, he met his wife, his first date with his wife was, hey, let's go out and see if we can roll my Jeep. Yeah. And they did. And they still got married. So, there's a match made in heaven. Anyway, I'd probably say body armor would be good for him. But even so, my feeling is if you have that kind of situation, maybe you need an external body cage, safety cage.
Like an exoskeleton.
An exoskeleton cage to really take that abuse. I'm like Scott. Sometimes I look at body armor, and I mean, it can look pretty neat. Don't get me wrong. It has that post-apocalyptic thing going on there. Yeah. But okay, you putting it on there to protect the body, but you're going to drill a bunch of holes in the body. Yeah. And the worst part is I see people try to drill those nutsert holes, which are about 5/8 of an inch in diameter, with a twist bit. Folks, twist bits were not made for sheet metal. Get yourself a proper sheet metal hole saw. You'll get round holes out of a... there's a company that makes it, so this is a company name, but they call them rotobroaches. And it's a case, and I'll warn you, they're not cheap. But you drill your pilot hole 1/8 of an inch where the... you want your bigger hole, and then you pick the appropriate rotobroach, and then it has a little pin, no teeth on that center pin, but a little spring-loaded center pin. It fits in that 1/8 inch hole, and it will drill a perfectly circular hole with a clean edge that you can then put a little rust treatment on. When was the last time you saw somebody using a nutsert and actually paint the edge before the nutsert went in?
When we did your steps on the rock slide engineering.
Okay, well, that's not a...
What? No cookie? I had the right answer.
You did. But that's the point, is that, we go in there and we put the nutsert into now raw steel, and people wonder why after 2 or 3 years they take their body armor off, which, if you've ever seen a nutsert, there's a flange on the surface that it tightens up against. Okay. So it can't help but leave just a couple of thousandths gap between the body armor and the body, but you just left raw steel under there to get soaked and dirty and
water and mud and grime, and
then they wonder why they've got this big rust bubble. But I put the body armor on. So be honest with yourself. What are you doing it for, and why? If it's for looks, by all means, go for it, folks. I'm with it. There's things on my Jeep that are for looks too. Most of them are stickers, but
That one added 14 horsepower.
Well, that was you and your what was the one you had hybrid on the on the JKU.
That got me an extra 2.3 miles per gallon.
Now, the other thing to remember, and I'll throw this out to you, to Stephen, when you use aluminum body armor on a steel Jeep, is you are setting up the potential galvanic cell. You have two dissimilar metals. You're bolting them together.
And a lot of time the nutshirt's brass.
The nutshirts are brass or bronze.
With aluminum on top.
Exactly. So you're building up a little battery that can really do some corrosive work. And you know, my rock slide steps are that way too, but that's why I painted the inside. But I still check them periodically and touch up if it comes along. The other thing is that people, it came with stainless steel hardware. To me, the idea of stainless steel hardware and armor are kind of at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Contradiction.
Because if you've ever worked much with stainless steel hardware, unless you buy a specific grade, usually 304 tempered, it's very soft. And so you bump your body armor and you look back and, it protected the Jeep, but it's now laying on the side of the trail because every one of the bolts sheared off.
Especially if it's on a underbody panel.
An underbody panel. So,
and even then, we talked about this. If you're in the Rust Belt, you know, they salt the roads. Now you got aluminum with a steel with again, galvanic corrosion.
So again, not trying to say don't do that, but just be aware of what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's where we talk about doing your research, looking in the instructions and stuff like that. Because, like Kevin and I touched on, is that and I feel the same way. If you want to put the body armor on, that I actually looked at getting tub rails. But I didn't want to have the giant corner armor. For a while, their company just sold those tub rails, and everyone's like, well, why would you want that? You're contradicting yourself. Well, if I get a hard top, which I really want, I just tried to buy a hard top with a broken side glass, and now I just spend, 3 days trying to find side glass that doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't exist anymore.
So I'm like, you know what? Okay, now I really want that rail.
Yeah. But I will say, in all fairness, to aftermarket manufacturers, they do make replacement glass. What he's talking about is he found an LJ OEM top with the wiper, and the only fault was the side glass was busted.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the few pieces of side glass we found were used, and they wanted more than they did for a whole brand new aftermarket top.
I found one company in California that wanted. Bear in mind, this top was a very good price. So we're talking in the 3 digits, not the 4 digits like everyone else wants. And I was really close to buying it. And then when I found out the glass cost almost as much as it was going to cost me for the top, not including shipping and installation.
And that's a bonded glass.
And it was the last one in the country
that you could find. Yep.
I'm like, no, I might go aftermarket.
Yeah. But so, Stephen, to that answer, I'm not a big fan of aluminum underneath. It can work. I'm not saying it can't. You are talking about overlanding, not rock bouncing and rock crawling. However, that's the whole thing about overlanding is the balance. When you overland, you may have to cross rocks in a river, or you may have a broken trail that requires you to hit a few rocks. Just as equally, though, you might be running through a sand wash or even cruising down a hard dirt-packed fire road and worried more about your shocks. And trust me, I came from an area where that was the case, and you'd be doing 25 miles an hour, and all you felt like was whoop, whoop, whoop. And you could feel you going from bump stop to extension shocks going bam against their top, and then down all the way, then up, and you're like, slow down. It's like, I can't. I'm sawhorsing. If I slow down, the Jeep starts rocking nose to tail like a kitty's, rocking horse in the house. And the best thing to do is to get up around 45 or 50. And if you've ever watched Baja racing, you can see that the body's going flat and the tires are going and the shocks are glowing bright red.
Yeah, hashtag send it. Let's just keep going.
Yeah.
One of the quick things we do want to touch on real quickly, because I know we're getting a little long segment, but we talked about like the idea of the original people doing overlanding and stuff like that. The one thing you need to watch, because there was a TSB when the JK first came out, they had really stout actual skid pans, or skid plates. But the problem is that debris kept getting caught in between them and the catalytic converters, and poof, fire. So if you do want to do body armor and stuff like that, and you got anything near a hot area, make sure you keep it clean. But my biggest thing on skid plates, again, If you feel you need them, by all means, it's better to have it not need it than need it not have it. So if that's what you want to do, great. But my whole thing is this, is that as important as the skid plates are, remember, you got those two spindly little crayons that go from the differential to the transfer case that are hung out below everything.
No, that's what we were talking about. You know, skid plates only cover the bottom of the belly, not the drive shafts. And
I would be more worried about bashing a drive shaft than I would an oil pan, in my opinion.
But again, this goes back to the very first comment I made. Know how to wheel your Jeep.
Yeah.
Know where your wheels are versus your vulnerable parts. Most of the time, the successful guys that do the rocks are the slow and careful guys who use a spotter and watch out. And yes, their differential will touch, but it just touches barely. They've got purchase. On the other hand, if you're trying to make the invincible Jeep that can do all, I'm sorry, I've never seen one. I know it's a pipe dream. Last time I checked, it was called a helicopter. Alternately, a good horse will usually do the same, although the Alaskan Gold Rush would probably teach you differently, because there's a whole mountain pass going up the mountain called Dead Horse Pass, and it's because it was full of horses that prospectors broke. Let's just put it that way.
You know, it's funny. You're not funny at all about that situation.
No, it wasn't.
What the interesting thing my boss said the other day is, because another guy was going to go to a greener and better pastures, and kept talking about
another job, not the other greener.
So. This leading back to the other comment where I told my HR person, you know, be the reason why HR carries a taser. But moving on,
which she found out she does.
Yes. So the point I'm trying to make is that he goes, the path to Everest is paved with go-getters.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind. It's good to be out there and be a go-getter, but caution. If you're going to do overlanding, and keep in mind of the potential for that.
So where does that leave you on aluminum versus steel, Stephen?
Yeah, we went a long ways on that one.
Well, we did, but it's kind of one of those topics. We also sat all the way through lunch at an Irish pub talking about this subject at great length. Oh, because shouldn't be water. Yeah, no.
That's going to get an email.
I'm quarter Irish, I'm sorry. Both aluminum and steel will work.
Yeah.
I tend to find steel armor down low to be less of a risk, more trail fixable. One of the good things about steel is that if you do break it and you have a couple of batteries and a welding lead
stick,
you can put it back together. Aluminum requires, a
clean room, expensive gas.
Maybe not a clear room, but the argon gas and the whole 9 yards. There is a little bit of a weight penalty, but not much. Here's a neat little fact that most people don't realize. Aluminum and steel, when you have equivalent strengths, whether or not you're talking about puncture, tensile, load bearing, to have the same strength between the two materials, they virtually weigh the same, because it takes more aluminum to have the same strength as steel. Why are airplanes not made with steel? Because you can't get steel thin enough. It's strong enough, but nobody really wants to fly in a really thin, aluminum, steel skinned.
Them wings is a flapping.
Well, and there was a lot of that, when you realize that aluminum can be alloyed and tempered to do different things. And Duralloy, which is used in a lot of, it's an old alloy, I'm showing my age there, is a more rigid aluminum. I just find that the corrosion potential brought by aluminum just hasn't been worth it for me. And probably the one biggest chunk of aluminum on my entire Jeep, there's two of them really, aside from the ones that Chrysler put in, like the bell housing of the transmission, which is known for breaking on that automatic, by the way, or the whole transmission, sorry, not the bell housing, the body, is I did give up my cast iron head for Edelbrock aluminum head, and so far I've been happy with that.
Yeah, he said one wheel in the air.
And then my snorkel intake pipe. But then again, the choice wasn't steel and aluminum, it was aluminum and plastic. So, and it's not in an impact zone, and besides, actually, I've taken a tree branch or three on the snorkel, and it survives a whole lot better than the glass it's in front of. So, Aluminum has its good uses. You'll probably be successful if you get an aluminum belly pan. Just keep an eye on it when you're under there looking for, white dust of corrosion from galvanic corrosions.
What about aircraft aluminum?
Okay, aircraft aluminum versus regular aluminum. Regular aluminum is very, very soft, and the different grades, 6061 is basically pretty much a common standard grade now. You can go with, the 5052s. If you look at the alloys, they have other materials blended into them when they're cast. Some control workability, some control ductility, which is a flex and give, and some control stiffness, and all these other elements. And aluminum's probably magical property is that compared to steel, it can be alloyed in so many ways to give you almost two completely different materials that are fundamentally aluminum. And here's the punchline is you don't know all the time what you're getting. Yeah. And a lot of aluminum strength also comes from tempering. So you've heard of 6061 T4, 6061 T6. Those are temper grades, and a lot of people don't like to temper because when you're doing bulk manufacturing, it's easier to punch out the softer aluminum.
Yeah.
Now, again, to muddy the waters more, aluminum in an impact situation, sometimes ductility can help. All right. It absorbs the blow. It takes energy away.
That's why a lot of the rebars in newer cars, the reinforcements behind that plastic bumper is aluminum.
Because
extruded.
But it doesn't straighten back out.
Nope.
It's required to be replaced after each incident. No matter how small, you go into a dealership, and it's not because they're a stealership. I hate that term. But, you'll have had a 5 mile an hour parking lot bump. And the skin of your bumper in your,
pops back.
Your Toyota Hingden, sport utility vehicle pops back, but it's hanging funny. And you look down there and go, okay. And you go to the shop, and they're like, okay, that'll be $2,800 for a new subframe, a new skin. But it just can't you just snap it back on?
Yeah.
No.
When did you work where I'm at? My favorite one.
Yeah.
The other day was, okay, well, how much to do the bumper? Okay, it's this, that. Okay, cool. So do I wait in the waiting room or?
I'll go back all the way to 1987 when my wife had an 86 Honda Prelude. Okay. That was when, no matter what color your Prelude was, the bumper was silver and black. Okay. And it had a skin on it, and it actually had a sprung bumper rather than a crush zone bumper. And she did get somebody, her car was in the parking lot at work, and she came out and the bumper skin was laying on the ground. And she was very upset, brand new car and all this stuff like that. And she called up Honda, and they said, well, bring it down, and so she stuffs the bumper skin in the passenger seat.
Just stuff, shuts
the door, drives down there, pulls in, and, she's lived with me already for quite a few years, so she understands. She's, I don't know what I'm calling my husband, how long's it going to take? And they're like, well, hang on a second, we're going to go look. And they looked out, and they could see the witness marks where the bumper had compressed but then come back out. That was back when they built those springy bumpers.
Yeah.
And he says, hang on a second, just calm down. And he made a call back to Your World, the parts department, and they had a skin in stock because, of course, it was the same skin on every.
Yep.
And he says, well, if you just have a seat, we'll have it done in about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
The guy walked out there, and all he had to do was take a pair of cutters, and he popped the remnants of the pins, the bottom half of the pins out of the holes, took the new bumper, slid it over, and snap, a couple of screws, moved the license plate holder and the license plate light over, and they brought it out and said, oh, you're done. And it was only about $500.
It's funny you said that because when I went up to North Carolina, my mother-in-law got a new hitch for her Lexus RX, and of course, where I work. So I go out there and get the hitch, and I sit down, and my father-in-law, again, he's old school, like you, bolting stuff on. I'm like, all right, Jeff, grab that side of the bumper. Okay. I grab, and I pull the 6 clips off. I mean, I just grab it.
Yeah, it zippered them off.
He's going, I'm like, hold on, and hold that side. And my brother-in-law was holding the bumper going with a wide eye, like, this is Mom's car. And I walk over the other side, and And we just carry the bumper over there, lay a towel down, and they're looking at me like, you are in so much trouble. I'm like, that's what they're designed to do. And they come over.
Did you go over to the pop out where the cutout is for the hitch?
Well, I had the new lower piece. Comes with the new lower piece.
A new lower trim piece.
So I pop that out. We snap it back in. I'm doing all this, and my wife walks through and goes, "Don't have Mom come out here if she sees the back of her car like this." I said, I took pictures. And then 45 minutes later, I'm hammering the thing back in, snaps back in. Yep. And Jeff's just like, "Oh, thank God this looks back." I would worry we were dead, man. I'm like, guys, this is what I do.
Well, and I remember when Snap Tight was a model kit.
Yeah. Now it's your car.
It's your car. And, even my TJ, you go up to the dash and people are blown away when I take the air vent cover off and it goes pop, and then take two little screws off and the whole center section goes pop, and there's your radios. And
yep. Now, here, hold this. What? Yeah. So it's fun being in the car business some days.
Yeah. So, Stephen, I trust we haven't scared you too much or given you too much confusing information. You can get away with either one of them, depending on what you want to do. If it were me, I'd go steel underneath. That's just my preference. Mm-hmm. The additional weight low like that will actually not hurt your stability.
No.
But it does add a little bit more mass. You got to propel down the road, so you might lose a tenth or two a mile per gallon.
It's negligible.
You might not.
Yeah.
Just clean out under the seat and collect the coins, and you may make up the weight difference.
Sorry, especially now, because I think a quarter's worth 85 cents. Moving on from that.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a quick little break?
Go right ahead.
All right. We'll be right back after these messages from nobody.
Okay, that one just hit me.
Hey, listeners, how you doing out there? This is Scott with your friendly reminder to check out our Patreon page we have. Thank you to all of our Patreons, including our corporate ones.
Yep.
Not to mention also the 4x4 Radio Network, but I did want to take a quick thank you to say thanks to Shadow's Dream, because they gave us another 5-star review on the iTunes thing.
Try
on
that
the
again
Apple phone.
in English?
No, I'm going to do it in Zachbarian. Truly appreciate Kevin and Scott's podcast. Very good mix of informative and entertainment. So we like to call it infotainment.
No, you like to call it infotainment.
Well, you
like to create your own language.
Exactly. So I would make up some kind of words, but I'd probably end up causing something to go wrong somewhere. It's 2020. I won't even do that. I'll probably summon some demon or something. So with that, we're going to get right back to the show. Alrighty, Kevin. So do you want me to hit the clicker button, or you want to do it?
No, you go ahead.
Okay, good. I have the power.
Okay, Mr. Gray Skull.
Alrighty, buddy. What's up, man?
Hey, folks, we're going to just have another little discussion here on alternators.
Okay. Wait, are we charging for this class?
We're recharging.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure, because I want to make sure we rectified the situation.
I spent probably an hour talking with Scott this morning with small words and big pictures, and now he thinks he knows it all.
No. But in my defense, and I'm looking in the camera's eye for the patrons right now, is that he got me up to par with current topics.
Keep trying. You'll get there one day.
I would never stop trying, sir. So what's up?
All right. What we're talking about right now, we're going to talk about, is an ongoing project. Mm-hmm. One of those little mystery ones that's going on with our last show's guest.
Yeah, John Carl.
John's 51 CJ3A Willys has been converted to an alternator. It was a generator based with that lovely Go Devil 60 horsepower flathead 4.
Was it 60 horsepower and less 3 guys in the bag? Now it makes it 59?
Probably. Okay. Air drag alone. Because all of us were kind of hanging out the Jeep a little bit. I still don't know how human beings fit in those things during the war. Human had to be smaller. But anyhow, the conversion is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure a few of our listeners have done it and are going, "Oh, that's easy." It is when it works.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't and does confusing things, it can drive you nuts. So let's talk a little bit. First off, a generator, it's a straight DC system. Mm-hmm. Takes a lot of weight, on the engine, hanging on the side. Takes a fair amount of horsepower to turn it, and it doesn't produce that much current. That's one of the downsides of why we don't build cars with generators anymore. That's why your aftermarket little emergency generator that sits outside is typically it actually is an alternator. Even though we call it an emergency generator, it uses an alternator. What's the difference? An alternator produces AC current, and a generator produces DC current.
Right.
Now, everybody says, well, but the Jeep and everything else I know runs on DC, and you are correct. However, an alternator can produce a lot more current, which is the volume, because when you do an alternator, you can do a full 3 phases of power as opposed to just 2 phase or 1 phase in DC. And what that simply means, folks, is the way the windings are put together, you can make AC is made as the armature. Listen to me. I'm getting my generator and alternator.
Where the brushes go?
Well, the rotor assembly inside.
I'm a horrible guest.
Can spin through the north and south poles.
Right.
Each one creates a pulse of positive or negative as it rotates. But as it goes past, there's still room to fit 2 more poles in a 360-degree circle. So you actually have 3 windings. And so you have this pattern. If you were to look on an oscilloscope, which is just draws a little line of where the current's going or the voltages are going, you'll see 3 overlapping sine wave curves. And
I'm not wrong.
No, you're not.
Okay.
And your AC in your house is done the same way, except once it comes in on the pole to the transformer, it's split down, and you usually get 2 of the 3 phases in your house. So if you go to your breaker box, you ever notice you have a right side and a left side? One of those is 1 phase. The other one's the 2nd phase. Well, what is the 3rd phase? Well, your neighbor got the 3rd phase and the 1st phase, and the one after that got the 2nd and the 3rd phase. And that's why sometimes you can get some weird stuff going on between houses that, well, he has power, and I have half power or no power. Yeah, and it's the phase thing. Regardless, is you get almost, not perfectly, the electrical engineers are cringing when I'm saying this, but you can get close to 3 times the power in a smaller space out of an alternator.
Right.
It's also way more reliable because instead of brushes riding on a commutator, which is a series of broken connections so that you cross from one to the other to the other to the other as it rotates, you have slip rings that are just smooth rings that never drag on the brush. It's just a smooth transition. Plus, the slip ring is not your power generation path. It's actually what's called the exciter path. So what's the problem here? Well, normally we use a GM style or Delco Remy style alternator for these conversions. I believe, what is it? A 10C model, 10CI. And not that matters, but it's often called a 3-wire alternator. And there's also a 1-wire alternator, which is basically just a 3-wire alternator with some internal circuitry. The 1-wires are okay, but they don't have much of a feedback loop, and plus they don't produce anything at lower RPMs until you get the engine speed up. Now, once the engine's gone past that, you can come back down to an idle and they'll work. So they can work, but they're best for things like, I'll be honest with you, drag strip cars that run for a short time, if you need an alternator in that kind of a situation, or limited use farm equipment and that kind of thing. And that's just my opinion, But the 3-wire is the classic. It's been in, well, everybody says, oh, that's a Chevy or GM alternator. It's been on every kind of car out there for ages.
It's the one commonly known, and again, as a parts guy, we hate this phrase, and I'm sorry, is, oh, they're all the same. Oh, it's the universal one.
Yeah, the universal one. Now, it does have a plug with 2 wires on the side, and then a bolt stud on the back with a big wire. And everybody, oh, yeah. And everybody knows that the bolt on the back goes directly to the positive terminal, though that's the charge port. That's where the electricity comes out, is the phrase. Well, that's half true. Half of it goes through the wire, and the other half goes out through the ground, which is the engine body, the brackets, the frame, and has to get to the negative terminal of the battery. More on that later. The other 2 wires have pin numbers, a 1 and a 2. Now, pin 1 is commonly called the, now, let me get this straight. Pin 1 is the exciter wire. Ooh, you're exciter. Are you excited? All right.
Good Jimi Hendrix. Are you experienced?
Basically, the armature assembly in the middle, the rotor assembly in the middle, needs an initial kick to get it to start, because right now it's just a lump of steel or iron with some copper wires on it. It's not an electromagnet, so it cannot force the field windings, which are outside it, to start generating current. So it needs a kick. So pin 1 is that kick. Simply put, in older vehicles that had a idiot light for charging, the key, you'd turn the key on, and the key would send electricity to the engine, to the coil, and whatever. It also sent it up to the light, through the light, and out to this pin 1. That's simple. And the light would come on, showing that you were flowing electricity out to the alternator. Now, they didn't tell you that. They just said, if this light comes on, you're not charging your battery. Well, yeah, it was a dirty trick because it worked that way. It's kind of like Chrysler's marker lights. There was no ground for that LED or that light bulb. Either one works.
It just been a happy happenstance.
Yeah, if current was flowing out, i.e., and the alternator wasn't generating its own electricity, that light would be lit. So once the engine's running, though, internal on that pin, the alternator dribbles back its own output to that light. Now, when you do that, you've still got your key switch feeding voltage to that light, but pin 1 is now equal to or greater than that power. So now I have 12 volts pushing back on the wire. Well, if you take a light bulb or an LED and stick both terminals on the positive terminal, it doesn't light.
No, it doesn't.
Okay. So that's kind of how that light works. That's all that needs to be on that. And it doesn't even have to be continuous. It's just got to be there to be on when the alternator starts spinning, to provide that initial excitation, is what they call it,
right,
to start it generating power. Now, pin 2, source of many problems. Most people tell you, just take pin 2 and take a jumper from that and run it right back to the stud on the back of the alternator. And that will work in a lot of cases. And in others it won't, because the 10CI alternator and its later variants, there's a whole bunch of variants. There's probably, I don't know,
just don't
500 or 600.
Don't assume they're all the same.
Some of them internally can handle that, some can't. But what that pin 2 is called the sense wire, and it's the eyeballs of the generator, so to speak, or the alternator.
Yeah.
Is the system charged or is it not charged? Do I have voltage? Do I not have voltage? So if the sense wire is plugged in somewhere that it's seeing above 12 volts, it thinks everything's hunky-dory.
Right.
And you're going, okay, well, if the battery's down, it should, there's a wire between the alternator and the battery. It should be the same. Well, yes and no. These details are very fractional. So you really want to take the sense wire to a location where you have the first potential for seeing low voltage. And I guarantee you, on a computer-based vehicle, that's going to be at the main, in Jeep speak, the PDU under the hood.
Right.
And that's, in fact, where Jeep puts their sense wire.
What is the PDU for those who don't know the alphabet soup?
Power distribution unit, also better known in the colloquial world as your underhood fuse box versus your in-vehicle fuse box.
Right.
The underfuse is where the battery voltage or alternator voltage goes to a main stud and feeds that whole bank of fuses, relays, and little electronic bits that everybody goes, wiggle it and see if it starts now.
Well, you talked about one time with the old school, with the external voltage regulators, about putting your hand on stuff and looking for that click.
Yeah, feeling the click. And we're not going to go into that on
sorry,
a whole other show.
That's a whole other show. My apologies.
That was probably an hour-and-a-half discussion all by itself, trying to explain how you do voltage regulation manually, not using any electronics.
Yeah, my apologies.
No, that's fine. You get me started. You're doomed. This will be a multi-part series.
Well, we only got one more battery left.
So anyhow, the thing is, right now, what's going on with John's? I don't really know. It's acting very strange. So when I get back out there, and John, if you listen to this show and get to it before I do, we're going to move that sense wire around. We're going to actually probably put a jumper cable on it, hook it to the positive battery terminal, because if your wire between the charging stud on the alternator and the battery positive is too small a gauge, you can have voltage drop there, which would confuse the sense signal.
Right.
Or we may take it all the way over to your bus bar, which you use for powering everything in your Jeep. Not that there's much load, because he converted most of the lights to LEDs.
Biggest load on that thing is going to be his radio.
One of the things I did find out was that sense wire needs to be a minimum of 10 gauge so that it doesn't have fractional voltage drop, because that will screw up the ability. The sense wire is obviously what the alternator is using to see, do I need to charge the battery? This is before the newer ones, which don't do that at all. The newer alternators are quite frankly dumb. Right. And they use, the computer does a voltage check, and it sends a signal out to the regulator to control the field intensities and generation capabilities. So this is a little bit of one of those, what do you want to call it, diagnosis process, where we're going to kind of wander through how it works, why it works, and what was the ultimate reason that right now it will not charge. It will drain the battery over time. And before everybody jumps up and sends nasty emails about the obvious, this is the second alternator. Both have been checked and both are functioning fine. It's the unique installation that is causing the problems. And yes, we've tried revving it up to get the RPMs up, and that works for a moment, and then it goes away as soon as you rev it up. So it's even to the point that when the engine is running, if you check on the terminals of the battery, you get no voltage.
Yeah.
Go figure that one. This one's got me a little puzzled, so I have actually gone and get the 10CI designs, the layout for the regulator, the tri-diodes, and the rectifier assembly, and looked at how the wiring's supposed to go, and have come up with several of the bits and pieces on that. So this is a teaser, as a lead in for you folks. There's no answer to this puzzle yet, but there will be.
Well, that's one of the things I want to talk about real quickly, is that one, because everyone knows, like, no, Kevin's stumped. It really is 2020 acting up. But no, really, when we went there, Kevin, we only spent, what, a couple hours?
If that,
you know. So again, plus we wanted to record the show with John, and it was one of these kind of things where we think we found the problem, and so we stopped. So this is an ongoing thing. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 tries to figure something out.
It does, because the initial thing, we thought we were having issues with the key switch, which feeds the excitation switch.
Yeah, because it's weird, because when we have the vehicle off, you show 12 volts of the battery. The minute you turn it, goes -1.
Yeah,
and it's like, what? So there's some more into this. So if you have an experience, by all means, email. We'll look into that. Also, too, I'm going to put both pictures of what Kevin just talked about on our Instagram account.
Okay.
That way people can see and have a visual representation of what we talked to. But the coolest thing...
And don't be scared away.
No. But the coolest thing that Kevin always talks about, because Kevin loves teaching, is he has, again, a plethora of knowledge in his own right, but a lot of stuff that he has, he goes and searches and finds online. And what was the website you found that on?
One of the guys,
information, anyways.
A lot of information comes from a lot of different sites, but one gentleman who goes into great detail is Bill Vista at BillVista.com, and he puts together just a kind of a spread of really neat stuff. And one of the things he does that I find, I guess, refreshing is the best way to use it, is that he puts in the facts, but and he will give you his opinions, but he earmarks them clearly as, this is my opinion or my experience. He doesn't tell you that yours will be the same. What he says is, here's 12 volts. This is 12 volts. We know it's 12 volts. Here is the wiring diagram from Delco, on the system. This is my experience with these kinds of situations. And while he doesn't say it, it's implied very clearly, your results will vary.
Well, the cool thing about it is, like, I like talking about back when, production and different things, I like drumming and situation. He breaks down what I used to call the hypothesis tree.
He does.
It's like, hey, this is what I did to get these results. Is there something outside the parameters of what I did while you're getting a different result? It doesn't mean you're wrong, just, hey, check this out.
Yeah. So I find him to be a great reference, and the information he has provided, he doesn't guarantee it or anything like that, but it's some very good information. I mean, anybody that can put, let's say, 8 or 9 pages just on alternator. And he covers a lot of details in it in a very factual, but unless you're really into that stuff, you'll probably zone out very quickly and get a little lost. But he does start with the very basics, like here is a magnet, it rotates in a wire, this creates and he explains single phase versus three phase absolutely better than my college professors and science teachers ever did.
And that's the cool thing about these websites, because I cite How Things Work website. That was really cool. But like Kevin and I, you and I talked about this, is that it's really cool because you see what he read, the depth, wrote the depth of information he has. You can compare that and you go, okay, I understand everything he's talking about. For people like me, there's a visual representation now.
Yeah.
Also, he has really, not only just on the alternator, but a plethora of knowledge. He even had one that honestly I'm going to check out when I get home, is wiring for dummies. And it showed the one little thing about 12-volt wiring basics.
Yeah, it basically said battery, switch, light bulb.
Yeah. So again, don't be
intimidated.
Thank you. Don't be intimidated by the wealth of knowledge. Yes, some of it will probably, for me, be a cure for insomnia, but there's a lot of good information. Kevin and I always talk about how the more you can better yourself and understand the vehicles and what you're doing, the better you're going to be, A, describing the problem to a technician or a friend if you're having that problem, and B, the more likely you're able to handle the problem yourself in a survival situation on a vehicle,
or just a repair in the garage, to be honest with you,
or help somebody else out.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun, and we were laughing because I got a call when Scott first came out to the house today to record this show, and it's a very good friend of mine in Central Texas who had nothing to do with a Jeep. He bought himself an RV, and he's brand new to the RV world, and his first trip was an utter disaster.
Yeah, which they usually are. Let's be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest, because you don't know. And he got to a campsite. Fortunately, he only went about an hour away from home, so he and his wife, and they plugged in the RV, and the dog was there, and they went out to get dinner. Had a great dinner, as he said, a little expensive, but okay, John, everything costs now. Nothing is $9.95. But they came back, and power was off, and we'll punch it to the punchline real quick. Is he's calling because if I plugged my truck back in or charged the house battery, everything came back on, AC and DC. But then when the battery would die, my AC would go off.
Now he's talking about AC power, not the air conditioning. Correct. I kept getting confused by that.
Yeah, that's true. The AC power would go off as well. And he says, I thought it was supposed to. It is supposed to. Now, my hypothesis for him, after we talked about it at length, was that your internal battery charger is either blown a fuse or has failed. Kaputs, because you're in RVs, and this is where the understanding you're talking about came in, Scott. The inverter charger system in most RVs, its control side is 12 volts, and it runs off the house battery. And why so? Because if it's inverting, which is creating AC current from DC current electronically, if you had your AC plug, if it automatically powered the AC system, you would have a live mail-in plug sitting in your storage unit with 240 volts on it, getting ready to fry something.
It's a giant snake, and I shall name him Zap.
Yeah, so there's a relay in there that connects and disconnects the shore power lead from the panel box. Well, that relay and control system is 12 volts because it has to be on all the time or available. And so if you lose your house battery, you can't
trip the circuit.
You can't start up the AC system without a jumper. Now, and I said, so you've got to go check that component. And then we got to the other fun stuff, which is where is it? And I says, God only knows in an RV. But the funny thing is here was an area that Scott had background, and he's over there while I'm talking to my friend John on the phone, and he's getting a hold of his dad, and he's getting a hold of his, and he's sitting here feeding me information because Scott's family, my stepdad restores Airstreams and actually builds trailers for a commercial, and your father-in-law and mother-in-law run run an RV park.
Yeah.
So, it's all where your background is, and that was a very unique reverse situation, because he's sitting there spitting out stuff to me as I'm sitting there talking.
Yeah, if anybody wants a mental image of me, one, check out our YouTube video channel, and two, imagine the young kid at the sprawling age of 21 years old holding the wire in his teeth with the buffer, squirting the polish onto this Airstream as I'm polishing the entire Airstream to a bright, shiny finish.
Oh, God, that's a picture and a half.
Oh, that explains why my dome is all chromed out, too.
Yeah. All right, folks, I think we have probably beat this one to death. Even though we have 4 hours and 34 minutes of video storage time left, we've only probably got about 20 minutes of battery life, if that.
But so no, we actually love doing this. This is fun.
Yeah, and I really appreciate, Stephen, thanks for the email. That is fantastic. I started digging into that, and I thought that was the coolest thing, was to read the fact that you've done a lot of research. My hat's off to you, sir.
Yeah.
Punchline is, do what you think works best for you. We've shared what we think works with us, but it's your Jeep, and you need to do what fits your desires.
Absolutely.
I'm just glad you're doing it, and you're doing it with a Jeep.
Exactly.
Awesome for that. So
go out there and have fun with it.
Absolutely. To go out and have fun, we need to do our usual of lockups and put the Jeep in 4-low and go out and hit the trail.
And as always, don't forget to take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail.
Right.
So remember to tread lightly. Did I do it again?
Wheel legal. That's the
And then I was supposed to put all that in front of it. My goodness, I didn't read the instructions.
Fine.
102, you'd think I'd get it right by now.
You'd think so, but I think you've been so creative lately, your brain is just, this big mismatch that turns it all up and spits it out in a new order every time.
It's like a ill-trained washing machine.
Yeah, and to the shout out to I'm sorry, I should remember the name of the guy who asked about made a comment to the Wheel Legal and Tread Lightly campaign. Tread Lightly is a formal campaign. Mm-hmm. It's a great campaign. You can join them. Mm-hmm. And sign up for them. But we also like to add the fact that while that is essentially the what I would call the tree hugger side, not being mean, but that's all about the nature. There's also the Wheel Legal side, which we added, and that is that a lot of property isn't public, and a lot of land use is by permission. So please, Wheel Legal, make sure you're on the land and are allowed to be on the land, as well as Tread Lightly. Keep it clean, keep it safe, don't disturb it, don't go off the trail, okay? Yeah. Because otherwise your kids will only know about it by hiking.
I have to leave. I hate to say this, but we have to interject. We actually, in a way, lost one of our biggest wheeling bases because they're not allowed. We're not doing permits right now in Citrus, and those of us know. And they've also closed it to off-roaders during the hunting season.
Right. It used to be open during season, but off-roaders made such a mess of things and such a noise that, and Florida, unfortunately, does have to control its deer population along with a lot of the northeastern states. Yeah. We've removed so many of the natural predators that if humanity doesn't hunt them, they're standing in your front yard, staring in your bedroom window, nibbling on your shrubbery.
Hopefully in a bathrobe.
No.
Oh, wait, no, the deer. Sorry.
The deer.
Old neighbor. Moving on. So with that, we are going to sign off, kids.
Yeah, we are. So, again, nice to, have 102 shows in the book.
Yep.
And you guys take care. We'll be back in another 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, for the Halloween edition. Woo.
Halloween edition.
All right, kids.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Patreon.
Bye.
But a big thank you to Ron over at Red Scorpion and the rest of his team for letting us use a lift. Again, like always, it's very, very genuine and genuine. Always be wary of strangers bearing gifts. I have no idea what this is, but it looks expensive and important. So with that, I'm gonna get back to work. See y'all later.
Bye. Hi guys.
Bye.